Hi everyone, welcome to A Beer with Brad episode 37. That's right, the first episode of year 4. It's amazing how fast this time has gone by. Tonight I got a few different things we're going to talk about. You see some things that are not photography here on the table, but first let's start with the beer. Tonight I have an OJ's Bronco from Pint Brewing Company down in LaVista, Nebraska, just 10 minutes from the house here. Pint 9 has made the OJ's Bronco for several years now. It's one of their seasonals. It comes out, I believe, late winter, right before spring. I just found this about 2 weeks ago. I found it at Wall to Wall Wine and Spirits, which is not too far up the street from here. I looked, I never did see it at the Casual Pint, and I never did see it at the grocery stores around the neighborhood here, but it's a lactose IPA, and some people call them milkshake IPAs. So you see, this one has a real nice, dark, rich color, and what the lactose means is it's brewed with milk sugars. So it has a little bit of a different taste, and then this one, and they're usually the lactose IPAs and milkshake IPAs are also usually brewed with fruit, and this one gets its nice color from tangerine and blood orange puree. So a lot of flavor going on in this can, or this beer. OJ's Bronco, it kind of has the OJ is kind of the orange juice, but the Bronco is, you can see a picture of OJ Simpson's white Bronco there. Like I said, in the past I always get a kick out of fun names and fun cans, so this is another one of those. This is the first year with the Bronco on the can. Before that it was just a white can with, it had an orange 9 for Pint 9, so changed the can up a little bit this year, but OJ's Bronco from Pint 9 Brewing Company. So that does have a really strong fruit flavor. You really taste that tangerine, blood orange, but it's a really good beer. And I don't remember, it's 7.3%, so it's a little bit higher than like a regular IPA, and a lot higher than like a traditional light beer, but still very, very drinkable with the fruits in it. So before we get started tonight, I just got a print in the mail. This is a Creighton picture I took 2 weeks ago. I think it was the 20th. It was the night that Creighton beat #1 UConn, and they were having what was called a stripe out. So depending on what section you sat in was what color shirt you were supposed to wear. So as you can see, it goes blue, white all the way around the arena. Super cool effect, and it really came out nice in this picture. The reason I ordered this picture, now that I got beer on it, was I tried some new post-processing technique. Actually, I pushed the camera further than I usually would push it. Tried some different post-processing techniques, and it came out perfect. I mean, I really look around this picture, and there's a ton of detail. You can't make out people's faces all the way across the arena, but anything I've ever done, you've never been able to make out the faces. If you look at the players down here along the court, you can tell who's who. On a big enough print, you could read the jerseys, you could see the coach, the whole 9 yards. And then in here, you could recognize a lot of faces. But once you get back into the background, there's just not enough detail resolution for that. But like I said, it's never, even with the old way I process stuff, it's never that way. So basically on this one, what I did was I pushed the camera settings, pushed the camera so that I was running a higher ISO or film speed. And then I used the new AI noise reduction that's built into Photoshop to kind of bring the noise back down, because when you increase the ISO, you're raising the amount of noise in the picture, and then then the Photoshop did a good job bringing it back down. And the one thing you don't see is when I take these pictures in the camera, that if you were to look at the picture that was on the back of the camera or when I download the computer without any processing, it's going to be a lot brighter than this. Basically, when you have a lot of noise, you want the picture a little bit brighter, so then when you bring it back down, kind of some of that noise is going out. So really, like I said, really happy with the way this turned out. Then yesterday at Creighton was senior day, so I took a lot of the same exact shots. But on senior day they call it a whiteout, so they want everyone in the whole arena to wear white. This year was pretty good. I'd say 95% of the people wear white. This one I would say more, it was probably closer to 98, 99% were in the right colors for this section. Then like I think I showed you a couple months ago or last month, they had the pink out where everyone was wears pink for a cancer fundraiser for the Hope Lodge. So cool seeing this. It's been a great year, fun year photographing Creighton. I photographed them 2 weeks ago when they beat UConn. This game here, UConn was the #1 ranked team in the country, and then yesterday for the senior day, they beat the #5 team. And then senior day is always special. The players get to do a celebration on the court after the game. So I photographed all that, and you can see all those photos from yesterday and all the Creighton photos I took this year. It's on the White and Blue Review, or go to whiteandbluereview.com, or look up White and Blue Review on Twitter, X, or Facebook. So very cool. So I was trying to decide what to do. I probably should have done something special since it's the start of year 4, but I don't have any ideas at the moment. I looked back, like I said, I always try to keep notes of things to talk about coming up in the future. And I looked, and the 2 notes I had was called Other Art, and I knew what that was because I've been thinking about doing other art for a long time. And then there was one note that just said circular polarizer, white balance, and saturation. No context, no notes. It's just those 3 words. Circular polarizer, which is this, white balance, and saturation. And that note I put in there was in September, which makes me believe that it was something to do with fall color. So the reason I think it had to do with fall color is because the circular polarizer is one of your best tools for getting the glare off the leaves to make really nice saturated leaves in the fall color. White balance, if you don't have your white balance dialed in just right, the leaves just don't pop to their fullest potential. And saturation is not the way that I ever make pictures more colorful. In fact, I would say in landscape photography, I turn down the saturation more than I ever turn it up. You see a lot of pictures out there where they just crank the saturation, and it's, once you've done photography long enough, especially when you've worked with Photoshop long enough, you can tell when someone just gets in there and puts a global saturation adjustment on the whole picture, and it usually looks pretty darn bad. So the circular polarizer, like I said, it's like a pair of sunglasses, and it takes the shine off the leaves. So you probably can't see it much in here, but as you rotate the polarizer, it polarizes the light. And so if you have a pair of polarized sunglasses and you're looking at a scene and you turn your head and you notice that the color gets different and the sky gets different, this is the exact same thing as like a polarized sunglasses. So as you turn it, the leaves are going to get more saturated because it's going to take the glare off of them, and then, or whatever, there's more scientific than take the glare off of them. It's probably like filtering the UV light or whatnot, and it also will darken or lighten the sky depending on which way you turn it. This is an awesome tool for darkening the sky, but you got to be careful, because if you don't get it set just right, you'll have a sky that'll be dark on one side and there'll be kind of like a half circle, and then there'll be light on the other side. So there's other ways you can darken the sky with Photoshop. This is a good tool. You just got to be really careful. If you're not careful, I would just recommend not using it if you're just using it to darken the sky. But leaves, and then the other thing I use this for a lot is waterfalls. So great tool. Get one and play with it. Make sure you shoot some photos with it and without it. But this would be much better than cranking up the saturation. And then, like I said, white balance. I notice, like, I love my Canon cameras, but their white balance is always, to me, just a little bit off. Especially like the outdoors, sunlight in the daytime, they want to shoot a little bit cooler than I think they should be shooting. A nice sunny day, I think my white balance is usually set towards like 5800 or 5900K. And I want to say that the Canon cameras usually have it down like 54, 53, which is, if you're shooting a fall color, the leaves, that's going to turn those yellows down. It's going to make them a little less vibrant on the yellow end. So, and then I also feel like the Canon cameras push the tint a little bit more towards the green and not towards the magenta end. And like with these Creighton photos I do, almost all the time, I usually on the action shots have my white balance preset, and then when I'm doing these crowd shots, if I don't have it set, I'm pretty much always changing it, you know, to like 4200, 4300 in there. But Canon gets that pretty close, but the tint, again, it pushes the tint way more towards the green than the magenta end. So a lot of times I'm editing that back towards magenta. And so circular polarizer and white balance, those are two things you need to dial in on your fall photography. And don't use a saturation. Like I said, if anything, I turn it down a little bit. And then a lot of times, like in the evening, I'll see like sunset pictures, people crank up the saturation. Again, a lot of times that is white balance and then exposure, overexposing the sky. So bring that sky back down a little bit, exposure-wise, get the white balance dialed in, and you'll probably have a really nice sunset without even touching that saturation slider. And if it's too saturated, turn it down. So we're going to talk about some other photography here, but that whole saturation key is going to go back to kind of what I talk about with this. So there's a old Beer with Brad, and then on my bio on my website, where I talk about how I got into photography. And basically I say that I had taken every other art and architecture class in high school that I could. I had taken drawing and painting, sculpture, art history, graphic design. I took them all, and I still needed one more class, so the only thing I hadn't taken was photography, and I got into photography. And so people a lot of times when they read that or they saw that Beer with Brad, they ask, what other kind of art did I enjoy making? Because I did it all. And drawing and painting, both those are kind of fun. I enjoyed a little bit of the abstract painting, not the realism, the realistic drawing. We did all the gesture drawing and the sketches and all that, and it was fun. It was all right, but the one class out of all those art classes that I took back in the day that really stuck with me was the sculpture class, and I believe that was my junior year or senior year. I can't remember. If it was a senior, it would have coincided the same time I was taking photography classes. If it was my junior year, it would have been obviously the year before. But I really enjoyed the sculpture class. I enjoyed working with my hands, working with the clay, making things, creating things. And back then, the photography wasn't too much different. You were in the darkroom. You'd be in there working with the film, making the prints. You'd be running through the chemicals. It was all hands-on. There was no computer part of it. And sculpture was very hands-on too. I really enjoyed that. It just let me work with my hands, not a lot of thinking. And I just really enjoyed it. And there's some things I learned in sculpture that I kind of still carry with me today in the photography. So the first thing we had to make was they called it a mask. I mean, it's very similar to this one, but it was just basically make a face and do whatever you want to it. And then got done. We got it dried and fired, and I made this ridiculous. It was the dumbest looking thing you've ever seen. Basically, it was a big oval, and then I stuck some circles on there for the eyeballs, and the lips were, I think, just rolled clay that I kind of formed in the lip. And then for a reason, I made the dude's tongue sticking out. I don't know why. It looked like a big cartoon character with his tongue sticking out. And so we got him done, and we presented him to class, and the teacher never called me out specifically, but he kind of made us all listen to his lecture about gimmicks, not creating gimmicks. And he said, when you make a guy and you make his tongue sticking out, or put a cigarette in his mouth or whatever, that's just kind of gimmicks, and it doesn't change the fact that what you made was really dumb or boring or whatever. It's just a gimmick that made it even worse, I guess. So that whole tongue sticking out as a gimmick has always kind of stuck with me. So when it comes to photography, there's a lot of gimmicky things out there, a lot of different things, and I've always thought back to that. It's been 26, 27 years ago now that I took this class, but always just make sure what you're doing with your art is good. It's okay if you want to make a really cool sculpture with a guy with his tongue sticking out, but it's when you add it to a terrible sculpture, it just makes it worse. And if you have a really cool photo that has some, I'll say, you see a lot of these, I don't want to call them cliche because there are some super cool ones, but you'll see people they'll bounce the moon on top of a building, and I've done that myself. But make sure the picture is cool before you add that moon to it, because that otherwise it's just a gimmick and it's not a good picture. Make sure the composition's right, the exposure's right, and you're not just trying to make an average photo interesting by adding something to it. So after he kind of tore my mask apart that had the tongue sticking out, and I never kept that. I threw it away and didn't really care for it. The second mask I made was this one, which it was supposed to be a realistic mask, and I feel like I did a pretty cool job. There's some things, looking back, when I was in high school, I probably didn't realize, but some of these wrinkles are probably not the most realistic, and some things around the eyes, but overall, I was really happy with this. At one time, it had a piece on the back where I could hang on the wall, and it's kind of cool. Then we were supposed to make coffee mugs, and so I did get some good compliments on this. The teacher really did like it, and he said I did a good job. Then I made this one, and I kind of forgot about gimmicks, and just kind of used some extruded clay as the hair. Just put some dots for the eyeballs. Again, I kind of lost focus of the details. Threw this thing together. The thing is like an inch thick. I mean, like literally my thumb fits in it. Get all done, and the teacher looked at it and he goes, "Can't fit much coffee in that." And he kind of moved on and gave me a pretty poor grade, but it was just kind of funny. I don't know, I didn't think much about it at the time. But yeah, it really doesn't hold much coffee. Now that I drink a lot of coffee, I kind of look back and it's like, yeah, he was right. So then I made another realistic mask, very similar to this one as far as the style. A lot of the facial features are similar, and then the hair, I really liked the way the hair turned out on this. And this, I probably did 3 or 4 different versions of hair. The cool thing with clay is you don't like it, you just scrape it off and keep going, try something different. So this, basically I just tore pieces of clay and then layered them up and then used a fork and just kind of drug them out, and then it kind of gets that cool thing. So this is very similar. The hair is just kind of ripped pieces of clay that I used a fork and then stuck them in the pot. That one turned out cool. This one I actually borrowed. This is at my dad's house, sitting on his fireplace. So I asked him to bring it over, and I could use it for beer with Brad. This one also, while the pot is pretty good, a potter would kind of make fun of it because when it gets down in here, it gets really thick, weighs a ton. So then, kind of did something different. We threw a piece of clay onto the pottery wheel and spun it around, and I put that circle in it and then made the mask on top of it. Another one, I think it turned out pretty cool. I like it. The only thing is it cracked in the kiln, and that's part of photography, or part of pottery and sculpture. Clay in the kiln, you never know if it's gonna survive. This one broke, but the teacher told me, he goes, actually it's kind of cool, and his suggestion was to find an old board and actually mount it kind of just a little bit of a gap into it. And I never got around to that. I'd leave it on there. It's usually sitting on the shelf up here and all the beer with Brad, so that is a great idea. I just never got around to it, but cool piece. And then I'm going to bring one over here. This one is also usually up on the shelf behind me. It's usually sitting right here at Beer Brad. And so this was a terracotta clay block. And it started off with this piece here. And this was the original sculpture. And I just I made it look like, stones or something was stacked. It just had fun creating that, geometric design. And then I got done, and the teacher's like, it's a cool piece, but he goes, you should really make a base for it. So I made these 2 blocks, and I actually stacked them up straight so they were flush. And he goes, maybe you should turn those, like offset them like this. And I thought, yeah, that's a cool idea. So I did it. Again, this one, it cracked in the kiln, but it sits together just fine. And then terracotta, when it's in the kiln, depending on how much oxygen it has, it can turn different colors. So you'll see that the bottom piece of terracotta It's more natural. That was the color of the clay as we were working with it. But then as it fired, these got, I forget what it is now, it's been 26 years or whatever, more or less oxygen than this one, so that's why they turned a different color, and this one's still the same. So, one of the other things that I learned from that teacher, and it's amazing how much I applied to photography from a sculpture class, but besides, make good art, don't do gimmicks. The other one was to listen to advice. This guy, and the photography teacher, he taught sculpture and photography. He wasn't my photography teacher, but he was one of the two photography teachers. So he always, every time you got done with anything, whether it be any of these masks, that piece, or the photography teacher was the same way, you get done with a piece of art and you think, gosh, this is awesome. I can't wait to show everyone. And most of the time they didn't hand out compliments. Like this one, like I said, I got done with that top piece, and I was like, well, maybe you should make a base. I make a base, and well, maybe you should do this. The same way with this one. I had on some hair. He goes, why don't you try doing this? I did that, and he goes, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. Why don't you try this? And he kind of almost held my hand as I went through it, got to it. And so the teachers, the art teachers, they really pushed you, and they just, every time you thought you had something good, they always taught you how to make it better. And I've always been open to comments and critiques and suggestions. If I post something on social media, like last week I said, pay less attention to the internet. But one thing that I always pay attention to, if another photographer, someone I know, respect, or someone that has a good critique, I'll listen to people. If they say, hey, you should try doing this, or you should try cropping this, or maybe you're a little bit overexposed, I'll listen to that kind of stuff. Because I was so trained to listen to make my art better back in the day. And it's kind of sad this day and age, because you see a lot of younger people get into photography and you say, hey, why don't you do this or whatever, and they almost get upset that you didn't say, oh, that's awesome. Because with social media, a lot of times you see everyone be like, oh, that's perfect, that's awesome, that's amazing, when it'd be like, well, it's good, but you could do this, it could be just a little bit better. Well, actually, one of the very first pictures I took, photography-wise, that the teacher gave me a compliment without any critique was this one. This is a picture I took in high school, and I brought it out of the darkroom, not obviously this canvas, but I brought a print out of the darkroom, and the teacher looks at it and goes, wow, that could hang above my fireplace, which I thought was an awesome compliment. So, I always have said that I'm always trying to get better, always trying to improve, and this is kind of where I learned how all that started, how I started listening and trying to make the best art I can and always making myself better. So I hope you enjoyed this, a little bit different episode, not a lot of photography. Haven't done a lot. I did 2 Creighton games since I talked to you last, and I did actually 2 Creighton men's games, 1 Creighton women's game, and UNO game in there, UNO hockey. So coming up soon is the crane, my Sandhill crane photography trip. It will be here before I know it. If you're paying attention to the news or to the crane counts, and you're just focused on the number of cranes, don't worry. There is a ton of cranes here already, but there will still be plenty throughout the season. I'm going late in March, or later in March, and I'm not worried about it at all. The early cranes that come in, they come into the eastern half of the roost, which is over by Grand Island more, and as the season goes on, they'll be over towards the western half of the roost over by Kearney more. So if you have a trip planned and you're not planning until later in the month, just know that there will be cranes there. There'll be cranes there all the way through the first or second week of April. And unless we got extremely, extremely hot weather, late March, there'll be cranes there through the first week or 2 of April, no problem. And going later in April, besides them being a little bit further west, you also have a lot better chance of seeing whooping cranes. If you go out there early in the year, you're going to see a lot of cranes, a lot of sandhill cranes, but as you go later in the season, you have a better chance of seeing whooping cranes, and there's still the sandhill cranes there. So you don't get panicked if you see the news that the record crane count, we've had a record crane count the first 3 weeks of the season. Week 4 starts tomorrow, so but like I said, I'm not worried about it. I'm not changing my trip plans. And I've been out there the first week of April and had plenty of birds to photograph. So hope everyone's enjoying their OJ's Bronco. It's a really, really nice IPA there. So, well, thanks again for tuning in to episode 37. Like I said, the first month of year 4. I don't have anything now planned for April. This kind of cleared out the last 2 things I had on my to-do list. Who knows what's going to pop in my head next, but if you have any suggestions, feel free, shoot me an email, brad@bradwilliamsphotography.com, leave a comment down below. Always looking for new ideas, new suggestions. Always looking for comments or suggestions on the beer too. I did, my buddy Steve, he said last month, he goes, you can pick a local beer. And he's right. I've had Nebraska, Iowa, and Colorado beers before, but the Illinois beer was the furthest away beer, so he was kind of shocked that I didn't pick a local beer. But Steve's a good guy. Did Creighton photos with him yesterday. He actually moved towards the end of the game to switch sides and made sure I got his seat because I was in the back row. So Steve's a good guy, and I always enjoy talking photography with him. Well, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you again next month.